In the dark days of May in the year 1943, amidst the vast expanse of the North Atlantic Ocean, Captain Lieutenant Eric Top stood in the conning tower of his submarine, UNUS 552, meticulously observing the horizon through his pair of Zeiss binoculars. The sea stretched out before him with an eerily placid surface. Almost unnaturally calm, he thought. Such stillness was unusual, almost suspicious, especially after more than 3 years of relentless war at sea. Over the years, Top had honed his instincts to a fine edge, learning to read the smallest signs of approaching danger. Today, each of those instincts was whispering warnings that something was terribly amiss. Below deck, his crew busily prepared for what should have been a routine patrol, familiar and predictable. The submarine, with a record of sinking 35 Allied ships totaling nearly 200,000 tons, was a formidable vessel in Germany's naval arsenal. Top himself was renowned among his compatriots as one of the most decorated U-boat commanders. He had been awarded the Knight's Cross adorned with oak leaves, a mark of valor and skill recognized even among the elite. His men affectionately called him the Ghost of the Atlantic, a nickname that reflected both his stealth and the deadly reputation he had earned. Yet, on this patrol, the Ghost was about to encounter something unprecedented, something that would shatter everything they believed about the art of submerged warfare and perhaps the very fabric of their understanding of the battle they fought beneath the waves. Dawn broke over the Atlantic, revealing an astonishing sight: a convoy of 40 merchant ships, sprawling across the horizon like a floating city of enormous vessels bound for war's supply lines. The sight sent excitement surging through Top's veins. This was the kind of target that could define careers, the kind that could turn the tide of the entire conflict. It was the sort of prize that could influence the outcome of the war itself. With commanding control, he raised his hand to signal the attack, a decisive move that could bring chaos to the convoy and potentially cripple what remained of Britain's vital maritime transports. But just as he was about to give the order, a strange sensation struck him, a noise, uncanny and unexplainable, piercing the usual sounds of the sea and machinery. Suddenly, a high-pitched electronic pulse emanated from above, an unsettling, almost supernatural sound that seemed to vibrate through the entire vessel, causing a shiver to crawl up Top's spine. This was a noise that should not exist, an unnatural flicker in the otherwise familiar soundscape of the Atlantic. It was sharp, piercing, and utterly ominous. It made his blood run cold. Top knew, instinctively, that this sound was a harbinger of something extraordinary, something that defied the norms of wartime submarine combat. Such phenomena had begun to be whispered about among the crew and officers. Rumors of secret weapons, mysterious detectability, and supernatural levels of precision in Allied tracking. But to this point, they had been dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of exhausted men, mere speculation to ease the fears of those beneath the surface. Prior to that morning, the tide of the submarine war had appeared to favor Germany. By late 1942, the U-boat fleet was roaming the Atlantic with almost unchecked dominance, operating in coordinated wolf packs guided by intercepts from advanced signals intelligence that could decipher British naval codes almost in real time. The German Naval High Command, under Admiral Dönitz, had amassed over 400 operational U-boats, an overwhelming force capable of strangling Britain's vital supply routes completely, choking off food, fuel, and wartime supplies. The statistics told a compelling story. During November of that same year, U-boats had sunk 119 Allied ships, a total of some 729,000 tons. British merchant losses exceeded the country's new ship construction by over 300,000 tons each month, a rate so alarming that it threatened to bring Britain to its knees by the summer of 1943. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, later recounted that the greatest fear he faced during the entire war was the U-boat peril. More frightening to him than the daring aerial battles of the Battle of Britain, the submarine threat loomed as a silent killer, undermining his nation's resilience. However, by May of 1943, a remarkable shift was unfolding. The tide of war was turning, and not in Germany's favor. Within a mere 3 months, Allied shipping losses had plummeted by 75%, a staggering reduction that stunned military strategists. Simultaneously, U-boat casualties had tripled, with experienced commanders like Top reporting encounters that defied all logical explanation. Men who had survived dozens of patrols and navigated countless dangers now faced inexplicable phenomena. Ships that seemed to detect their presence in complete darkness, aircraft that located them amidst foggy conditions, and destroyers that traced their underwater movements with uncanny accuracy. The German Naval High Command found itself baffled by this sudden and mysterious change. Their intelligence assessments showed no significant technological breakthrough among the Allies. Cryptographers confirmed that British codes still remained secure. Nothing had changed there. Yet, somehow, the Allied forces seemed to be hunting U-boats with almost supernatural precision, an ability that struck the Germans as inexplicable, even mystical. Rumors had begun swirling within the officer ranks at Lawrence, filled with wild theories about secret weapons, treachery, or esoteric detection methods that bordered on the supernatural. Some officers believed the Allies had developed new, secret systems that could locate submarines through means beyond conventional understanding. Others whispered of traitors within their own ranks, feeding information to the enemy. Top himself, however, dismissed these stories as the paranoid imaginings of worn-out sailors and exhausted officers, until that particular morning in May, when, standing watch in the conning tower, he first heard that unnerving pulse. When the voice pipe crackled urgently, ordering "Alarm, clear the bridge," the crew responded instantly. Sirens blared, and men hurriedly scrambled down the ladders while the engines cut off, switched from diesel to electric motors. Top watched in sober silence as the bow of U-Enus 552 tilted downward, signaling the beginning of a new and truly extraordinary chapter in submarine warfare, one that would challenge their understanding of the unseen battles beneath the waves forever. Even as the submarine silently descended beneath the surface, Commander Top experienced an unsettling feeling that something was amiss. The electronic signal they had detected originated from directly overhead, yet no aircraft was visible in the clear sky above. The only visible features were a smattering of clouds floating at around 3,000 feet, giving the impression of calm and serenity on the surface. Without hesitation, he issued a command, level at 60 meters, followed by an instruction for silent running, ensuring the vessel moved stealthily without creating any noise that could betray their position. Inside the control room, the first watch officer, Klaus Bergton, looked at Top with a mixture of curiosity and concern, silently questioning what he had seen or possibly heard. Top, sensing Bergton's unspoken question, simply shook his head and admitted, "Nothing. I saw nothing." However, he quickly added, "But I did hear something. An electronic signal. Very high frequency." Bergton's eyebrows furrowed as he considered what the signal might be. It could have been a SDAC, a sort of clandestine detection system, but that made little sense at that moment, because their submarine remained on the surface, and SDIC was not used at such depths. More precisely, it was not ASDIC, the traditional acoustic detection system, but something entirely different. They remained silent. The only sounds filling the control room were the gentle hum of the electric motors and the occasional creak of the pressure hull adjusting to the depth. Top checked his wristwatch, the seconds passing slowly. 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. Suddenly, the unmistakable roar of aircraft engines grew louder, cutting through the silence with an ominous precision. The hydrophone operator reported, "Twin engines, heavy, probably a Liberator." A chill ran down Pop's spine. They had originally been about 12 kilometers from their convoy when they submerged, and thus, the Liberator should have been scanning the vicinity of the merchant ships. Yet somehow, it had managed to find their exact position and was now approaching swiftly. Immediately, chaos ensued as the crew prepared for the inevitable. The depth charges were released, detonating in 6 successive explosions, each one closer than the last. The hull of the submarine groaned painfully, the pressure causing light bulbs to shatter and the walls to tremble. Crew members instinctively grasped the handrails amid the violent pitching of the vessel, but U-Enus 552 was sufficiently deep to endure the blast. The deadly explosions rained down from above, but thanks to their depth, they did not compromise the integrity of the craft entirely. For roughly 20 minutes, the sounds of the attack persisted, until finally, the Liberator retreated. Top, after waiting patiently for another hour of silence, ordered the submarine to surface. As they broke through the surface, he looked out but found himself confronted with an empty horizon. The convoy had vanished without a trace. It was an entire day's pursuit that had ended in failure that very night. Top meticulously recorded in his patrol log, detected by unknown means while still on surface. Aircraft appeared within minutes despite no visual contact. Recommend investigation into possible new Allied detection technology. Unbeknownst to him at that time, he had just encountered a top-secret form of radar technology known as Centimetric radar, a system so guarded that even most Allied commanders did not fully understand how it operated. 3 days later, Top and his crew encountered another convoy. This time, he was far more cautious and strategic in his approach. During daylight hours, he kept the submarine submerged, relying on the periscope to track the merchant ships from a safe distance. His plan was to strike only at night when the U-boat held all the advantages. It's important to recall that submarines in the year 1943 still operated primarily as surface vessels capable of submersion for limited periods. They were faster and had better visibility on the surface, and they could employ their deck guns to conserve torpedoes when necessary. Night attacks represented the optimal hunting time for U-Enus 552 because darkness rendered them invisible to aerial reconnaissance and made it difficult for escort ships to detect or target them. At precisely 11 o'clock in the evening, Top ordered the submarine to surface approximately 8 kilometers from the approaching convoy. The night sky was ideal for attack. The overcast clouds veiled the stars, and the absence of moonlight reduced visibility to less than 500 meters. He observed the dark shapes of the merchant ships as faint silhouettes against the starry backdrop, confident that the ships could not possibly see him. With calm authority, he issued the order, "Battle stations. Prepare tubes 1 through 4. The torpedo crew sprang into action, swiftly readying all 4 bow tubes. Top personally calculated the firing solution, taking into account the ship's speed, their distance from the submarine, and the angle needed to strike accurately. After 3 years of wartime experience, his calculations had become almost instinctive, honed through countless previous encounters. Finally, Top lifted his hand, signaling the crew to execute the firing order. The tension in the control room was palpable. Everyone understood the gravity of this moment, knowing that success could mean the destruction of enemy vessels, while failure could mean spotted detection and catastrophe. The night was quiet apart from the hum of machinery and the faint rustle of crew members preparing for the imminent attack, but beneath the surface, Top's mind was focused entirely on the precise timing and placement of each torpedo, ready to strike at the perfect moment. Suddenly, the waters surrounding them erupted with a blinding, almost blinding display of light. An overhead star shell burst fiercely, illuminating the night sky and transforming the darkness into a temporary day. In an instant, the submarine U-Enus 552 was laid bare, exposed to the open air and radiant light in a way that made it resemble an insect caught under a microscope's glare. The entire vessel seemed to shudder as the periscope spun hurriedly, trying to orient itself amid the chaos. Meanwhile, a formidable British destroyer was charging directly at them, its bow cutting through the water with a white, foamy crest that shimmered under the artificial daylight. This sudden appearance had come out of nowhere, without the usual warning signs, without radar contact, appearing instead as a lethal, unexpected obstacle in their path. It was as if the destroyer had materialized from thin air, catching them unprepared and vulnerable. The distance closed rapidly. The destroyer was far too close and moving with relentless speed. As the bow of U-Enus 552 dipped beneath the surface in an attempt to evade, Lieutenant Top's eyes caught a grim detail. The racks of depth charges mounted on the stern of the destroyer suddenly tilted backward. Almost immediately, the first pattern of explosive shells was released. They detonated at approximately 30 meters depth, just as the submarine's hull passed through the explosive zone. The impact was violent, causing the U-boat to lurch violently, as if it had been thrown by an unpredictable wild animal. Debris, cork insulation, and other materials from the interior rained down from above, adding to the chaos. Sparks flew from the main electrical panel, which hissed loudly and then went dark, plunging the interior into an oppressive darkness. The damage report poured out amid the confusion. Stern diving planes jammed. The hydraulic leak in the control room caused a rapid loss of the control systems, and the port electric motor was overheating dangerously. More depth charges rained down, this time at closer intervals and with greater ferocity. Each explosion was a brutal reminder of how relentless the attack had become. The pressure hull, the submarine's vital protective shell, groaned under the immense stress, a sound every submariner both feared and despised. It indicated that the steel of the vessel was bending beyond what it was designed to withstand. Top ordered urgently, "Take her to 180 meters." This was deeper than the submarine's recommended limit, yet they had no alternative but to go down even further to evade their pursuers. For 3 long hours, the destroyer continued its relentless pursuit, staying directly overhead with uncanny precision, dropping patterns of depth charges in a systematic, almost calculating manner. Every time UENU's 552 attempted to slip away, the destroyer would adjust its course with unwavering accuracy to maintain its position. It was a game of constant countermeasures, and yet, eventually, the attack ceased at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning. Top waited silently for another couple of hours before finally surfacing the submarine from its depths. When the hatch was finally opened and they broke through the surface, they discovered that the convoy they had been trying to find and protect was long gone, vanished into the night. By the 3rd week of May, Lieutenant Top had managed to sink only 2 ships, an utterly disappointing outcome considering his extensive experience and the formidable efforts he had put forth. Even more troubling was the fact that he had been forced to dive a total of 14 times to avoid approaching aircraft, an exhausting and perilous game of hide-and-seek in the deadly back-and-forth of war. His fuel reserves were dangerously low, and his crew was visibly exhausted from the relentless tension and physical strain. But the most disturbing aspect was the pattern, or rather, the disturbing lack of any pattern, that he was beginning to see. It was a repetition of irregular detections that defied logic, leaving him puzzled and uneasy. That evening, he spread all his charts and maps across the wardroom table, the dim light casting shadows over the scattered papers. Barston and Herman joined him, their faces serious as Top pointed to various locations marked with a red pencil. "Take a look at this," he said gravely. "To summarize, over the past 3 weeks, which amounts to 14 separate incidents, every time we've been detected, something is off." He paused, emphasizing the next words carefully. "What do you notice?" Barston studied the markings intently. The points didn't form any recognizable pattern. They were scattered across different times of day, under various weather conditions, and in a variety of circumstances. Some detections occurred during broad daylight, others under cover of night, some in foggy conditions, others in clear weather, some when the submarine was surfaced, and others when it was submerged at depth. They happened whether the vessel was near convoys or far from any obvious shipping routes. The pattern, or lack thereof, was startling. "Exactly," Herman agreed quietly. "There's no consistent pattern to when we're detected. It means they can find us at any time, no matter the situation." The realization sank in heavily among the trio. The implications of this randomness were staggering and ominous. Top then pulled another chart into view, this one depicting the losses of UFOs, underwater battle units, across the entire Atlantic Ocean. The figures were devastatingly high. In the first 20 days of May alone, 31 UFOs had been sunk, more than the entire month of April, and significantly more than any previous month throughout the conflict. "The Americans are building Liberty ships faster than we can target them," Top remarked grimly, tracing the graphic lines with his finger. "In April, they launched 140 new merchant ships, and we managed to sink only 56. That leaves us with a net gain of 84 ships for the Allies in just that month alone. Every month, their strength grows. Every month, our losses accumulate. It's a relentless tide of increasing power on their side, while we falter and weaken." He drew a graph on the chart, illustrating 2 lines, one ascending, symbolizing the growing number of American shipping, and the other descending, representing U-boat attrition. The 2 lines intersected somewhere around the beginning of July, clearly indicating a turning point, a moment when the Allies' logistics and resources began to surpass the German underwater fleet's capacity to sustain their campaign. This sobering visualization underscored a grim reality. The tide of war was shifting, and the few victories they could hope for were slipping further out of reach as the odds stacked ever more against them. If the current trend persisted, by the approaching summer months, our ability to sink enough enemy ships to make any significant difference would diminish to the point of insignificance. The convoy system that the Allies had established appeared to be growing increasingly unassailable, nearly impervious to our efforts to disrupt or destroy it. And if we could no longer pierce their convoy defenses, then the entire purpose of our mission, of our strategy, became moot. Everyone on our side understood this implicitly. There was no need for further explanation. It was clear that Germany's entire war plan hinged on one critical objective: starving Britain into submission through relentless naval blockade and attrition. To succeed, we had to keep the convoy routes open, to prevent the Allies from delivering supplies and reinforcements. If the U-boat submarines, our stealthy underwater warriors, failed to intercept and sink enough Allied ships, then in essence, Germany's prospects in this conflict would be doomed. The entire war effort could hinge on just one failure. Barston, one of our officers, voiced a question that everyone was pondering in silence. It was the question that gnawed all of us. What had changed so dramatically in such a short span of time? Only half a year earlier, we had been confidently asserting our dominance in these waters, regularly sinking enemy ships and maintaining the threat. Now, our boats barely managed to survive even minor patrols. It felt as though we had been pushed to the very edge of defeat. So, what exactly had the Allies developed or improved that made our previous tactics obsolete? Top, our technical officer, shook his head in frustration and confessed, "I don't know." He hesitated before adding, "But whatever it is, it's not just a single new device or technique. It's an array of advancements." He explained that the enemy was detecting our submarines not only on the surface, but also when submerged, which was unprecedented. They were locating us at night, despite the darkness aiding our stealth. This shouldn't have been possible, as our detection methods relied heavily on visual and radar cues that should have been less effective in low visibility conditions. Furthermore, the enemy was tracking us underwater with an accuracy that far surpassed anything we had seen before, beating our own advanced ASDIC systems by a significant margin. Herman, another technician, pulled out a thick technical manual pointing to the data. "Our METOX receivers," he said, "can detect British radar signals from a distance of up to 30 kilometers. Yet, somehow, they're locating us with aircraft that our METOX equipment never picks up. Either they've developed radar operating on a different frequency, one beyond our detection capabilities, or, worse, our METOX systems are no longer functioning properly." Top listened carefully and finished the thought. That would mean every UOT, underwater observation team, in the Atlantic is flying blind. We're effectively in the dark. The implications of this new development were nothing short of terrifying. Hundreds of U-boat submarines relied on their METOX systems to warn them about approaching aircraft overhead. If this foundational assumption was wrong, and our detection systems were no longer reliable, then every submarine was marching into a deadly trap. They could be spotted and attacked at any moment without warning, with no way to detect or evade their enemies effectively. In response to this alarming situation, Top took a decisive and risky step. He made the call to break radio silence, an action that could jeopardize their position but was necessary to alert higher command. "The Naval Command needs to know precisely what we're experiencing," he declared. It was a dangerous move. British direction-finding stations, which could triangulate radio signals within minutes, might pinpoint their location and track their movements. But the potential advantage of warning the entire fleet outweighed the risk of exposure. With meticulous care, he drafted a message that read, "Detected repeatedly by unknown means. Aircraft locate UNUS 552 in zero visibility. Surface radar detection without METOX warning. Night attacks by destroyers with impossible accuracy. Request immediate technical analysis." He then encoded this message, transmitting it in a brief, 3-second burst before diving and changing course, standard after any transmission to reduce the possibility of interception. 6 hours later, the reply arrived. It was succinct but telling. "Your report acknowledged. Similar reports from multiple boats. Technical investigation underway." Continue patrol. Top read the message twice, pondering its meaning. The response clearly indicated that they weren't alone. Many other vessels had encountered similar phenomena. This was not an isolated incident affecting only UNIS 552. It was a widespread issue impacting the entire U-boat fleet, suggesting a fundamental shift in the Battle of the Atlantic. Something had changed at the core of their enemy's technological defenses, but no one on our side yet understood what it was. Time marked the date as May 24, 1943. That night, UNIS 552 was running on the surface to conserve battery power, fully exposed but necessary to recharge. It was exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, the darkest part of the night, considered the safest window for surfaced submarines to operate. Top, the commanding officer, stood in the conning tower alongside 2 vigilant lookouts. Their task was to scan the sky continuously, sweeping their binoculars systematically across overlapping arcs to maximize their field of vision. This meticulous routine was part of standard procedure, what had kept them alive and fighting for nearly 3 turbulent years of war. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. Their METOX receivers remained silent, showing no radar emissions from the air or surface. No signals or signs of enemy activity had been detected. Then, without any warning, the night erupted into chaos. The glow of powerful searchlights burst directly overhead. A Liberator bomber, an aerial monster built to strike submarines, appeared out of the darkness, already immersed in its attack run. Its lights illuminated the entire surroundings as it carved through the night sky, closing in on their position in a calculated and relentless manner. The submarine was less than 200 meters from its target, an immediate and startling closeness that allowed Top to see the pilot's face clearly through the small window of the cockpit. The entire scene unfolded with breathless urgency. There was no time left for evasive maneuvers, no opportunity to dive to safety, nor to align the anti-aircraft guns for a defensive shot. The only thing they could do was observe helplessly as the depth charges descended rapidly, plummeting into the water with deadly precision. When these explosive devices struck the surface, they hit the water at a depth of only about 15 meters, shallow enough for the full fury of the blast to directly pound against the hull of UNIS 552. The resulting explosion was deafening, causing a complete blackout. The lights on board flickered momentarily before extinguishing altogether. In the sudden darkness, chaos erupted as crew members shouted frantic orders, metal groaned under stress, and water sprayed violently from ruptured pipes and damaged fittings. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting a sickly red glow over the cramped interiors before also failing, plunging the submarine into complete darkness. Amid this chaos, men scrambled to make their way to the control room, topsy-turvy from the force of the blast, his ears ringing painfully. The rapid influx of reports began to come through, each message more alarming than the last. The forward torpedo room was flooding. The stern control planes had ceased to respond. The pressure hull had been cracked near frame 47, and the battery compartments were filling with water, threatening to incapacitate them entirely. Despite the mounting panic, Top's training and experience enabled him to process this cascade of dire information with cold, measured clarity. It was clear to him that UNIS 552 was dying. Its life was measured in mere minutes, perhaps even less, before it would become uncontrollable and sink beneath the surface. The crew responded swiftly and mechanically. Air was pumped rapidly into the ballast tanks, causing the bow to tilt upward as the submarine clawed desperately toward the surface like a wounded animal fighting to survive. At exactly 4 hours and 7 minutes past midnight, the submarine broke through the turbulent water's surface, water cascading off the deck in a chaotic torrent. A second later, they saw the Liberator aircraft still circling overhead, poised for another attack run. The order was given, prepare to scuttle. Despite their fear, the crew acted with practiced efficiency, a testament to their training and resolve. They opened the scuttling valves, releasing the valves that would flood and destroy the vessel from within and attach demolition charges to critical equipment, the code books, and the Enigma machine, before calmly climbing onto the deck to abandon their sinking boat. The Liberator made another pass above, but surprisingly, it did not drop any further charges. Its pilot clearly saw that the submarine was beyond saving. Men stood on deck, knowing their fate was sealed and their mission was over. UENUS 552 was definitively finished. Top was the last to leave. He stood in the conning tower, watching his ship slowly surrender to the relentless force of the ocean, acknowledging the end of 3 grueling years of war. Years marked by the sinking of 35 ships, countless patrols completed, and survival against insurmountable odds. Now, the boat was being claimed by the depths, a victim of an enemy they had never even seen, an enemy that had struck without warning. As the water level rose, covering the tower, Top made a final decision. He leapt into the icy Atlantic, feeling the cold embrace of the vast, unforgiving sea swallowing him whole. When he broke the surface, UENUS 552 was already gone, just bubbles and debris marking the last trace of her existence. The Liberator, having completed its mission, dropped life rafts and swiftly departed the scene. 2 hours later, a British destroyer arrived, swiftly rescuing the survivors, 42 men out of a crew of 48, who were huddled on the deck, wrapped in blankets and drinking hot tea to stave off the cold. It was in that moment, amid the relief and exhaustion, that Top finally grasped the full scope of what had occurred. A young British officer approached him, showing him a radar display, a circular screen alive with glowing green dots. That's how they had found him, he explained softly, with no malice. This was the power of Centimetric radar, an advanced system that allowed them to detect and track objects from as far as 30 kilometers away, regardless of weather conditions or darkness. Meanwhile, the officer elaborated, every aircraft and escort ship in the Atlantic had become part of a comprehensive surveillance network since March. The entire vast ocean was under constant watch, secure against any stealth or evasive tactics. Each green dot representing a submarine, a vessel, or a target that was now visible, trackable, vulnerable. Top stared at the display, feeling a faint sense of fear and resignation seep into him. The information struck deep. Each dot symbolized a potential threat, an enemy that could be located instantly and decisively. The cold realization settled over him in that moment, a recognition that the tide of the war was turning irrevocably against them. The war that had once seemed so distant and uncertain now felt inevitable, its outcome foregone by the relentless march of technological superiority that they were only beginning to comprehend. The campaign against the U-boats, Germany's formidable underwater fleet, had long relied heavily on the element of invisibility. The German submarines thrived by lurking silently beneath the vast stretches of the Atlantic Ocean, always waiting for the right moment to strike unexpectedly, then swiftly disappearing into the depths before Allied escorts could mount an effective response. Their tactical advantage was rooted in the assumption that they could remain hidden, outmaneuvering the enemy and hitting when least expected. But this delicate balance was about to be fundamentally disrupted. If the Allied forces managed to develop the capability to see every U-boat, to meticulously track each of their movements, and coordinate responses with precision and speed, then the Germans' advantage, the element of surprise, simply vanished. The notion of concealment, once a cornerstone of U-boat strategy, would no longer hold. The mathematics of this newfound reality were straightforward, yet brutally effective. Germany could construct new U-boat models at a pace faster than the Allies could sink them, but the Allies, in turn, could produce merchant ships at an even faster rate. The addition of Centimetric radar technology further tipped the scales, enabling Allied ships and aircraft to defend their vital convoy routes with unprecedented efficiency. The year of 1943 marked a dramatic turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. It became widely known among the German Navy as Black May, a month etched into history due to catastrophic losses. During these weeks, the U-boat fleet suffered a crushing blow, with a total of 43 submarines sunk, almost a quarter of the remaining operational fleet. The human toll was equally devastating. More than 1,000 courageous submariners lost their lives in this relentless attrition. Rear Admiral Donitz, faced with an inexorable series of defeats that he could neither explain nor halt, found himself cornered by circumstances that demanded drastic action. On May 24th, the very same day that the UENUS 552 was destroyed, he issued a revolutionary order. All U-boat units were to withdraw from the North Atlantic. This decision represented a stark acknowledgement of defeat, the first of its kind in the entire war. Officially, this retreat was framed as a temporary redeployment, justified by claims of necessary technical upgrades and repairs. Yet, everyone within the submarine service understood the harsh truth. The battle they thought they could win was lost. The technology that had turned the tide against them was the revolutionary Centimetric radar, especially the cavity magnetron device developed at the University of Birmingham in 1940, a breakthrough later refined by American engineers at MIT's Radiation Laboratory. Traditional radar systems at that time operated on relatively long wavelengths of about 1.5 meters, which limited their resolution and effectiveness. By contrast, centimetric radar, working on much shorter wavelengths of approximately 10 centimeters, offered a dramatic leap forward, giving it the name Centimetric in recognition of this advantage. These shorter wavelengths allowed for significantly sharper resolution, enabling detection of small targets like periscopes and even snorkels, the breathing tubes used to operate diesel engines while submerged, at ranges up to 5 kilometers, and surface submarines at distances of nearly 30 kilometers, even in total darkness or thick fog. This leap in detection capability transformed the undersea war. Suddenly, what was once invisible was now clearly visible. The impact was immediate and devastating. In March 1943 alone, U-boats sank a staggering 108 Allied ships. The following months saw a sharp decline. In June, they sank 28 ships, and by July, the number had fallen further to just 17. Meanwhile, the production of Allied merchant ships accelerated at an astonishing rate. American shipyards were launching a new Liberty ship approximately every 42 hours, while British yards were completing escorts at a pace that outstripped U-boat capabilities. The terrifying mathematics that had unsettled Winston Churchill in 1942, the idea that Germany could outbuild and outsink the Allies, were now being reversed. By the summer of 1943, the Allies were outpacing the U-boats in ship construction, effectively gaining a strategic advantage that would eventually turn the tide decisively. However, the true significance of this victory extended beyond mere numbers. It lay in the comprehensive nature of the system that had been developed. Centimetric radar was merely one crucial component of an integrated anti-submarine warfare network. This system included high-frequency direction-finding technology called HFDUF, which could locate submarines by tracking their radio transmissions. It involved advanced depth charges equipped with magnetic detonators capable of destroying submerged targets with greater accuracy. Forward-throwing mortars known as Hedgehog allowed Allied ships to attack U-boats without losing sonar contact, increasing their chances of success. Additionally, escort carriers supplied crucial air cover across the mid-Atlantic, providing visual and aerial detection that further heightened their advantage. Complementing these technological innovations was the intelligence gleaned from ultradecodes, valuable insights derived from deciphered Enigma messages, giving the Allies a strategic edge akin to having their enemies' plans laid bare. All of these elements combined marked the culmination of a technological and tactical revolution that decisively shifted the balance of power in the Battle of the Atlantic, signaling the beginning of the end for the German U-boat menace. The development of coordinated convoy tactics during World War II was the result of meticulous operational research and technological innovation. Each of these advancements proved effective when deployed independently. However, it was their strategic integration that transformed the entire naval landscape. By combining radar, signal intelligence, and tactical coordination into a cohesive system, the Allies rendered the German U-boat campaigns virtually unsustainable. This integrated approach created a formidable defensive network that the German Navy found increasingly difficult to counter, despite their efforts to adapt. Although German naval intelligence personnel sensed that something had fundamentally changed in the Battle of the Atlantic, they never fully grasped the nature or scope of these technological shifts. They suspected that improvements in radar equipment might have played a role, but their understanding of its capabilities was considerably limited. They were aware of the existence of HFDUF, high-frequency direction-finding equipment, which could detect and locate radio transmissions, yet they underestimated just how precisely these signals could be pinpointed. Crucially, They remained unaware that the cryptographic code-breaking breakthrough with Enigma had been achieved, even as it silently tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. This lack of comprehension about the technological revolution meant that many German commanders continued to operate under the assumption that they were simply facing numerically superior forces rather than a new, advanced system of detection and interception. Even after the war, a significant number of German officers believed that their defeat was primarily due to the Allied strength in numbers rather than technological superiority. Admiral Donitz, in his memoirs, lamented that the failure of the U-boat campaign was solely because Germany's ability to produce submarines was insufficient. This view ignored, or perhaps was blind to, the technological upheaval that had rendered German submarines increasingly obsolete. One of the most notable survivors of this turbulent period was Erich Topp, who managed to survive the war. After spending 2 years imprisoned in a British prisoner of war camp, he returned to Germany and, in late 1958, joined the newly formed West German Navy. Rising through the ranks, he eventually attained the rank of Rear Admiral. In the later years of his life, Topp spoke candidly in interviews about the events of May of 1943, expressing a complex mixture of respect and bitterness. He appreciated the technological advancements achieved by the Allies, acknowledging the ingenuity that underpinned their success. Yet, he also harbored resentment that so many German sailors and officers had lost their lives because their commanders refused to believe or act upon their reports of being detected by unknown, unassailable means. Topp recounted, during a 1990 interview, how his own crew had repeatedly warned that something had changed in the dynamics of detection. They told their commanders that they were being tracked and identified by methods unknown to them, possibly indicating advanced radar or signal interception techniques. Still, the German Naval Command persisted with their customary tactics, sending patrol after patrol into perilous waters, until the inevitable occurred. Ships were sunk, sailors lost their lives, and many were captured. The fundamental flaw, as Topp described it, was the Allies' success not only in building better radar systems, but in orchestrating a comprehensive, integrated operative framework. They shared intelligence seamlessly, coordinated their technological assets, and continually adapted their tactics based on real-time information. The core lesson from the Battle of the Atlantic is that technological superiority alone does not guarantee victory. Rather, understanding and effectively applying that technology is key. The Allies' victory was rooted in their ability to synchronize their systems: radar, signal interception, intelligence analysis, and tactical adjustments, creating a seamless and responsive network that outpaced German efforts to adapt. This strategic cohesion allowed them to uncover and neutralize the U-boat threat long before the invasion of Normandy in June of 1944. By that time, over 5,000 ships had successfully crossed the English Channel in what remains the largest amphibious operation in history. Remarkably, not a single vessel was lost to U-boat, a term that had perhaps become virtually obsolete in their collective consciousness, yet which represented a once formidable submarine threat. This victory was achieved largely through a technological marvel most people had never heard of: the cavity magnetron. This device, roughly the size of a fist, emitted radio waves with wavelengths of 10 centimeters, providing a revolutionary means of detecting submerged submarines. Its introduction forever transformed underwater warfare and played a pivotal role in shifting the outcome of the Second World War in favor of the Allies. The victory in the Battle of the Atlantic was the result not only of the bravery and skill of sailors and airmen, but also of the tireless efforts of engineers and scientists working behind the scenes. It was a triumph forged in university laboratories, experimental workshops, and factory floors, an unseen war of technology and intelligence that turned the tide of history. This technological leap, coupled with strategic ingenuity, exemplifies how innovation in science and engineering can decisively influence the outcome of critical military conflicts. If this story of technological mastery and strategic adaptation resonates with you, you might be interested to learn how other pivotal battles and campaigns also hinged on breakthroughs in science and technology. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we explore further examples of invisible victories, fascinating tales of innovation that altered the course of history in ways most people never fully appreciate.